The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. "Why so many tattoos, old man?" The cadet's voice was sharp, confident. The kind of confidence that comes from never having been tested. What this kid didn't know about the man standing before him would change everything he thought he understood about survival, sacrifice, and the weight a human soul can carry. You're about to see why some questions shouldn't be asked unless you're ready for the answer. Type respect in the comments if you believe veterans deserve our honour. Fort Benning, Georgia, August. The kind of heat that makes the air shimmer and the asphalt soft. Inside, Building 47, the air conditioning hummed against the relentless summer, keeping the briefing room at a temperature that felt almost cold after the furnace outside. 23 cadets sat in metal folding chairs arranged in neat rows, their uniforms crisp, their faces young, their eyes filled with the particular arrogance of youth that hasn't yet learned what it doesn't know. This was SERE training orientation: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. The course that would teach these future officers what to do when everything went wrong, when the helicopter went down, when the extraction failed, when they found themselves alone in hostile territory, with nothing but their training and their will to survive. They'd been waiting for 15 minutes. The instructor was late, or so they thought. Cadet First Class. Ryan Mercer sat in the front row, legs spread wide, arms crossed over his chest, 22 years old, top of his class in physical fitness. His father was a 2-star general currently serving at the Pentagon. His grandfather had commanded a battalion in Vietnam. Military pedigree ran through his veins like blood, and he wore it the way some men wear expensive watches, not for function, for display. "Probably some desk jockey," Mercer muttered to the cadet beside him. "They always send the guys who couldn't hack it in the field to teach this stuff." A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. Most of the cadets were too smart to join in, but too junior to push back. The door at the back of the room opened. No announcement, no fanfare, just the quiet click of a handle and the soft creak of hinges that needed oil. The man who entered didn't look like what they expected. He was perhaps 60 years old, maybe older, with a face that looked like it had been carved from weathered oak. Grey hair cut short, not quite regulation, but close enough. He wore simple olive-drab cargo pants and a tan t-shirt that stretched across shoulders that were still broad despite the years. No rank insignia, no name tape, no unit patches, but it was his arms that drew every eye in the room. From wrist to shoulder, both arms were covered in tattoos. Not the kind of tattoos young soldiers got on weekend passes. Not anchors or eagles or the names of girlfriends. These were different, older, faded in places, the ink having settled deep into skin that had seen decades of sun and sweat, and things that left marks deeper than any needle. The designs were varied. A compass rose on one forearm, a series of tally marks on the other, coordinates, dates, symbols that meant nothing to the untrained eye but clearly meant everything to the man who wore them. A snake eating its own tail, a mountain range, what looked like a river system, a skull with a Special Forces beret. He walked to the front of the room with a gait that was unhurried but purposeful, every step measured, every movement economical. The way a man walks when he's spent a lifetime learning that wasted energy can mean the difference between living and dying. He didn't introduce himself, didn't say a word, just stood there, scanning the room the way a predator scans a landscape. Eyes moving from face to face, assessing, cataloguing. The cadets shifted in their seats, suddenly aware that they were being evaluated by someone who knew exactly what to look for. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. The air conditioning hummed. Someone coughed. Mercer couldn't take it. "Hey, Pops," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You lost? The VA's down the street." A few cadets snickered. Most had the good sense to stay quiet. The man's eyes found Mercer, and something in that gaze made the young cadet's smirk falter. Just for a moment. Just long enough to notice. "You're Mercer," the man said. Not a question. His voice was quiet, but it carried the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. "Your father sends his regards. He asked me to keep an eye on you." The colour drained from Mercer's face. "You know my father?" "We've worked together," a pause, "several times, in places that don't appear on any map you've ever studied." The room went quiet. Really quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when young people suddenly realise they've miscalculated badly. But Mercer was his father's son, proud, stubborn, unable to back down even when every instinct screamed that he should. "Okay, so you know people," he said, recovering. "That doesn't explain why you're here, or why you look like you fell asleep in a tattoo parlor." He gestured at the man's arms. "Seriously, why so many tattoos, old man?" The question hung in the air. Several cadets winced visibly. One young woman in the third row closed her eyes, as if she couldn't bear to watch what was about to happen. The man didn't react with anger, didn't bristle or posture. He simply looked down at his arms as if seeing the ink there for the first time in years. When he looked back up, there was something in his eyes that made Mercer wish he'd kept his mouth shut. "You want to know about the tattoos?" the man said. "Fair enough. That's actually a good place to start." He pulled a metal folding chair from against the wall, placed it at the front of the room and sat down. Not behind a podium, not elevated on a platform, eye level with his students, close enough that they could see every line on his face, every scar on his arms, every piece of ink that decorated his skin like a map of a life most people couldn't imagine. "Every tattoo on my body marks a mission I came home from," he said. "Not a mission I completed, not a mission I was proud of, a mission I survived." He held up his right forearm where the compass rose sat above a series of coordinates. This one, Laos, 1983. Officially, we were never there. Unofficially, my team spent 3 weeks in the jungle trying to locate a pilot who'd gone down during a reconnaissance flight that didn't exist over a country we had no military presence in. He traced the coordinates with his finger. We found him, or what was left of him. The coordinates are where we buried what we could. The compass is because we navigated by stars for the last 4 days. The NVA had equipment that could track radio signals. We went dark. No GPS back then anyway. Just a map, a compass, and the knowledge that if we got lost, no one was coming to find us. The room was silent. Absolutely silent. 23 cadets who had been fidgeting and whispering moments ago now sat perfectly still. 4 of us went in. 2 came out. This tattoo is for Sergeant First Class Miguel Santos and Staff Sergeant David Park. They're still there, in that jungle, in a country that officially never happened. He rolled his arm, revealing the inner forearm where a series of tally marks ran in neat rows. These marks, everyone thinks they're kills. They're not. His voice softened, just slightly. They're saves. Every line is a person I got out of somewhere they weren't supposed to be. Diplomats, journalists, aid workers, soldiers from allied nations who found themselves in situations that required unofficial assistance. He counted silently, his lips moving. 47. That's how many people made it home because my team was willing to go into places no one else would go. Some of them know what happened. Most don't. They woke up in hospitals with no memory of how they got there. That's how it's supposed to work. Mercer's arms were no longer crossed. His posture had changed entirely. He leaned forward now, eyes fixed on the man's arms as if seeing them for the first time. "The snake," one of the cadets said, almost involuntarily. A young man in the second row pointing at the Ouroboros on the man's upper arm. "What's that one for?" The instructor didn't seem annoyed by the interruption. If anything, something like approval flickered across his face. "Operation Serpent, Colombia, 1989. Cartel extraction." He touched the circular snake eating its own tail. "We went in to get a DEA agent who'd been made. The cartel had him in a compound in the mountains. 46 hostiles. 6 of us." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was matter-of-fact. The way someone might describe a particularly difficult commute to work. The snake represents the mission itself. "We went in at night, worked our way through their perimeter, found our guy, and got out the same way we came in. Full circle. No contact until we were already gone. They didn't know anything was wrong until morning, and by then we were on a plane to Panama." "No contact?" another cadet asked. "With 46 hostiles?" "The best missions are the ones where you never fire a shot. Bullets make noise. Noise brings attention. Attention gets people killed." He looked at the young woman who'd asked. "Your job isn't to win firefights. Your job is to complete the mission and bring your people home. Sometimes that means fighting. Most times, if you're smart, it means not being seen at all." He stood, rolling his shoulders, and turned slightly so the cadets could see his back. Even through the t-shirt, they could see the outline of more ink. He lifted the hem just enough to reveal the bottom portion of a large piece that covered much of his back. "This one I can't show you completely, but it's a map. Every place I've operated, every country, every mission, some of them you'd recognize. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, others you wouldn't. Places in Central Asia, Africa, South America. Places that would surprise you. Places that would scare you. He lowered his shirt and turned back to face them. The point isn't to impress you. The point is to teach you something important about the life you've chosen. He walked toward Mercer's row, stopping directly in front of the cadet who had called him an old man. You asked why so many tattoos. Here's the real answer. Because I needed to remember, not the victories, not the awards, or the commendations that sit in a drawer somewhere. I needed to remember the cost. He held up his left arm where a small cluster of stars sat just above his wrist. 7 stars, arranged in a specific pattern. My first team, Delta Force 1985, 7 of us. I'm the only one still alive. His voice didn't waver, but something in his eyes changed, deepened. 3 died in training accidents, 2 in combat operations. 1 took his own life 6 years after leaving the service. Couldn't carry the weight anymore. He touched each star as he spoke. Sergeant Thompson, Master Sergeant Williams, Staff Sergeant Kowalski, Captain Reed, Specialist Davis, and Sergeant First Class Harold James Bennett, who was the best soldier I ever served with, and who deserved better than what this country gave him when he came home. The room was absolutely still. Mercer's face had gone pale. Every piece of ink on my body is a reminder that survival isn't guaranteed, that the men and women beside you are the only thing standing between you and the darkness, that every mission, no matter how well planned, can go wrong in ways you never imagined. He stepped back, addressing the entire room now. You're here to learn survival, evasion, resistance, escape. Those are skills, important skills, but skills can be taught. What can't be taught is the thing that actually keeps you alive. What's that? The young woman in the third row asked. The people to your left and right, the team, the unit, the brotherhood. He gestured at the tattoos covering his arms. Every mark on my body exists because someone else made a choice to stand with me, to fight with me, to die with me if that's what it took. I survived 40 years of operations that should have killed me 100 times over, because I never operated alone. Because when everything went wrong, and it always goes wrong eventually, I had people who would walk through hell to bring me home. He looked at Mercer. You called me an old man. You're right. I am old. That's the point. Most people who did what I did aren't old. They're dead. I'm standing here at 62 years old because I learned something early that some people never learn at all. What's that, sir? Mercer's voice was different now, quieter, the arrogance stripped away. That the most dangerous thing in combat isn't the enemy. It's ego, pride, the belief that you're special, that the rules don't apply to you, that you can do it alone. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each cadet in turn. Every person in this room has potential. Every one of you could be exceptional. But exceptional soldiers don't survive because they're talented. They survive because they're humble enough to know their limitations and smart enough to rely on their team. The door at the back of the room opened. A colonel entered, full-dress uniform, ribbons stretching across his chest like a history of American military operations for the past 3 decades. Every cadet stood immediately, chairs scraping against the floor. The colonel's eyes found the instructor and something passed between them. Recognition, respect, history. At ease, the colonel said. The cadet sat. The colonel didn't. He walked to the front of the room and stood beside the instructor. I see you've met your new instructor, the colonel said. Good. I wanted to introduce him personally, but I see he's already made an impression. He turned to face the class. Most of you don't have the clearance to know who this man is. You don't have the clearance to know what he's done, where he's been, or what he's sacrificed. What you need to know is this. In 38 years of special operations, this man completed over 200 missions across 6 continents. He's been shot 4 times, stabbed twice, and once walked 47 miles through the Afghan mountains, with a broken leg because extraction was compromised and his team needed to reach the border. The colonel paused, letting that sink in. He holds the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, twice, the Bronze Star with Valor 3 times, the Purple Heart 4 times, and a number of awards from agencies that officially don't give awards for operations that officially never happened. He looked at the instructor with something like reverence. When the army needed someone to teach the next generation what survival actually means, they asked him. He said yes, not because he needed the work, not because he wanted the recognition, because he believes that the men and women who serve deserve to learn from someone who's actually been there. The colonel turned back to the class. Whatever preconceptions you walked in here with, I suggest you abandon them now. The man standing before you isn't a desk jockey or a has-been or whatever other nonsense you might have thought. He's a living legend who chose to spend what should be his retirement making sure you have a better chance of coming home alive. The colonel nodded to the instructor and left, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The room was silent. The instructor looked at Mercer, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with something that looked almost like compassion. "You have a question, cadet?" Mercer stood, slowly, his hands at his sides, his chin up but his eyes different, humbled. "I apologize, sir. I was disrespectful. I didn't know who you were." The instructor shook his head. "Don't apologize because you found out who I was. Apologize because you judged someone without knowing anything about them. That's the lesson. Not that I'm someone important, that you made assumptions based on appearance and age and decided you knew everything you needed to know." He looked around the room. In the field, that kind of assumption gets people killed. The farmer who might be an informant, the kid who might be carrying a grenade, the old man who might be a former Mujahideen fighter with more combat experience than your entire squad combined. He paused. You can't know everything about everyone. That's impossible. What you can do is approach every situation with the understanding that you might be wrong, that the person in front of you might have depths you can't see, that the assumptions you're making might be the very thing that gets you or your team killed. Mercer nodded slowly. "I understand, sir." "No, you don't. Not yet." The instructor's voice wasn't harsh, it was simply honest. Understanding comes from experience. What you have now is awareness. That's the first step. He turned to address the entire class. "Over the next 8 weeks, I'm going to push you harder than you've ever been pushed. I'm going to break you down, strip away everything you think you know, and rebuild you from the ground up. Not because I enjoy it, because the situations you might find yourselves in won't care about your feelings, won't care about your background or your family name or how many push-ups you can do." He touched the tattoos on his arms. "The only thing that matters when everything goes wrong is what you're made of. And you won't know what you're made of until you've been tested in ways you can't imagine." He looked at the tally marks on his forearm, the 47 lines that represented 47 people who made it home because of him and the men he served with. "But I'll tell you something else, something the colonel didn't mention." He rolled up his sleeve higher, revealing another small tattoo high on his bicep. It was simple, just a series of names written in small script stacked one on top of another. "These are the ones I couldn't save, the extractions that failed, the missions where we arrived too late, the people who were killed while we were still trying to reach them." His voice was steady, but there was weight in it. The kind of weight that only comes from carrying something heavy for a very long time. "There are 11 names here. 11 people I was supposed to bring home. 11 families who never got to say goodbye. 11 failures that I carry every single day." He lowered his sleeve. "The tattoos aren't trophies. They're not decorations. They're reminders of what's at stake, of what the cost really is, of why every decision you make matters, because the consequences of failure aren't abstract. They're names, faces, families destroyed, lives ended." The room was utterly silent. You could hear the air conditioning cycling, the distant sound of vehicles on the base roads outside. But inside this room, 23 cadets sat in perfect stillness, absorbing something that couldn't be found in any textbook. This course will teach you how to survive in hostile territory, how to evade capture, how to resist interrogation, how to escape if you're taken. Those are the skills. He stepped forward, his presence filling the room. "But what I really want to teach you is something else. I want to teach you humility. I want to teach you that the world is more complex than you think, that people are more complex than they appear, and that the moment you think you know everything is the moment you become dangerous. Not to the enemy, to yourself and everyone around you." He looked at each cadet in turn, spending a moment with each face. "Some of you will wash out. That's not a failure. Not everyone is meant for this work. Some of you will graduate and go on to careers you never imagined. And some of you, God help you, will find yourselves in situations where everything I'm about to teach you will be the only thing standing between you and a very bad ending." He walked back to the front of the room and stood at ease, hands clasped behind his back, feet shoulder-width apart. The posture of a man who'd spent a lifetime in uniform. "My name is Sergeant Major Thomas Webb, United States Army, retired. For the next 8 weeks, I am your instructor. What you do with what I teach you is up to you." He looked at Mercer one more time. "Any more questions about my tattoos?" Mercer shook his head. "No, sir." A faint smile crossed Webb's weathered face, the first sign of warmth he'd shown since walking through the door. "Good. Then let's begin." 6 months later, at the graduation ceremony for the SEER course, a young lieutenant approached Webb during the reception. It was Mercer. Different now, leaner, harder. But there was something else in his eyes. Something that hadn't been there before. "Sergeant Major, I wanted to thank you." Webb looked at him. "For what?" "For that first day. For not letting me off easy. For teaching me what I needed to learn instead of what I wanted to hear." Webb nodded slowly. "Did you talk to your father?" "I did." Mercer paused. "He told me some things. About operations you ran together. About what you did for him in Mogadishu. That was a long time ago. He said you saved his life. Said you carried him 2 miles under fire to reach extraction after his convoy was ambushed." Webb said nothing. "He also said you never told anyone. Never put it in any report. Never asked for any recognition. Your father earned his rank on his own merits. He didn't need people thinking he got where he is because someone helped him once." Mercer extended his hand. Webb looked at it for a moment, then took it. A firm grip. The grip of a soldier. "I have one more question, Sergeant Major. Go ahead." "The names on your arm, the 11 you couldn't save. Do you ever stop carrying them?" Webb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "No, you don't. That's the point. The weight is what keeps you humble, keeps you sharp, keeps you from ever thinking you're invincible." He looked at Mercer with eyes that had seen more than any young officer could imagine. "The day you stop carrying the weight of your failures is the day you become dangerous, because that's the day you stop being careful." He released Mercer's hand. "Remember that when you're in command. Remember that when you're making decisions that affect other people's lives. The weight isn't a burden. It's a gift. It's what separates the leaders who bring their people home from the ones who don't." Mercer nodded. "I will, sir." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Sergeant Major, my father told me one more thing." "What's that?" "He said that when you retire for real, when you stop teaching, you're going to get one more tattoo. The last one." Webb was silent. "What's it going to be?" The old soldier looked at his arms, at the map of a life spent in service, at the compass and the tally marks and the stars and the names of the fallen, at the record of a career that had cost him more than anyone would ever know. "A blank space," he said finally. "Empty. Clean. Right here." He touched a spot on his forearm, one of the few places not covered in ink. "For all the missions that never happened, all the people I'll never know I saved, all the soldiers who'll go through this course and survive because of what they learned, even if they never remember where they learned it." He looked at Mercer. "The best legacy isn't the things people remember you for. It's the things they don't even know you did. The invisible work, the quiet sacrifices, the lessons passed down that save lives long after you're gone." Mercer didn't know what to say, so he said nothing, just saluted. A crisp, perfect salute that held more respect than any words could convey. Webb returned it, one soldier to another, one generation passing something essential to the next. And somewhere in that gesture was everything the course had taught him. Humility. Respect. The understanding that the person in front of you always has depths you can't see. Some lessons aren't learned in classrooms. Some lessons are written in ink on the skin of men who've seen too much and somehow kept going anyway. And some questions, once answered, change everything. If this story moved you, wait until you hear what happened when a homeless veteran walked into a military recruiting office. The sergeant's reaction? You won't believe it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of hidden heroes who deserve recognition. Comment honor if you believe respect should be earned through action, not assumed through appearance. And hit that like button if you believe our veterans' sacrifices should never be forgotten. Some heroes don't wear their medals, they wear their memories, and that makes all the difference.